I really, when I started, I wanted to create something that in and of itself was useful, not a waste of people's time. And so I'm pretty selective, and I want to make sure as much as possible it's very high quality. It's, very digestible, and it's not me just pretending I have all the answers, telling people what to do. So I'm trying to strike that balance. Hey, these are perspectives, take it in. Much more about helping a parent just get into a better decision-making place than me saying which therapies I like or don't like or what they should do, and that's kind of a very fine line to walk. I think a lot of parents who are, in my position, you want someone to tell you what to do. And I'm trying to tell them, no, you don't want that, but you can get to a much better place where what makes sense for your child as you're trying to parent and do the best job you can, it's about them getting that clarity. And again, whatever people choose to do, if anything, that's totally up to them. I just would love to create a dynamic, help to promote a dynamic within the family that's not as heavy, not as stressful, not, and it's really about, I guess the way I bottom line is, it's about preventing unnecessary suffering for everyone if you navigate a different way.
Yeah, that's well said. And there's a lot of people in autism, like the so-called care teams are constantly like telling people what to do, what they need to do, what they can't do. And I hate to say it, but I question a lot of their training. So it makes it kind of tough to not understand what is right. And, you're in a high pressure situation there because something is wrong. Obviously, something is wrong. How do I make it better? Before we begin, I would like to share a couple of the different products. The first one is Chroma, lights designed for humans. But I will have to tell you, you need to kind of act fast here because they're selling out a lot of products for the holiday seasons. They've ran a lot of good holiday deals. Their new product, the Trinity, incredible, the various wavelengths of light. It is essentially, these products appear into one. It's like an all-in-one. Chroma Light Designs are, their engineering is the huge benefit of this. You can see these devices with spectrometers to see the exact wavelength, or if you just click on them, you can just get everything you want to know about these products. You can use Autism at checkout for 10% off. The other product is Daylight Computer Company. You can use Autism for $50 off at checkout. The DC-1 is no joke, especially outside and at night. If you go outside, here's a good picture of it right here. The screen is just so bright that you can just continue to use it. It's so functional outside, and that's not the case with other devices. This is the only device like this. With the Daylight Computer Company, you can the writing technology on it is like pen and paper. It's like pencil and paper. It's just so fascinating, this technology here. This is a special type of technology here, and it mimics writing on paper, which is something humans evolved under, and it's a big impact for learning and how we remember things versus reading things and typing things. It's a big difference here, and it's undervalued. And you can just draw on it. There's a slice of the mesencephalon. Remember the mesencephalon episode? You have things like the substantia nigra right here, the red nucleus. This is all very fascinating stuff here. The superior colliculi, we talk a lot about right here. The relay station for vision, deep in your brainstem. The Daylight Computer Company is fantastic. And at night, there's no blue light. This is also the only device like this. Daylight Computer Company is the future of technology, but it's already here. You can use Autism for $50 off at checkout. The next one is Fig Tree Golf, makes Christian golf apparel and accessories for youth, women, and men. They have some very cool products here. So I'm happy to offer 10% discount at checkout using Autism for Fig Tree Golf as well, for any golfers out there. I know it's kind of a nuanced or niche kind of area here, especially for the Autism podcast, but I like Christianity and I like golf. I'm happy to offer a discount, 10% off, use Autism at checkout. And then finally, the Cognity AI designed for the autistic phenotype. It delivers different levels of social skills. It delivers different types of activities and understanding for helping the autistic phenotype. And it was created by Kate, who designed it. She had this vision to help her brother. And she's very passionate about this. They're expanding out from Europe to the US, and they're hoping to make some good progress here. And it's, you can see up here, it's for clinics, schools, parents, and students. It's very useful for the autistic phenotype. It's very easy to understand, and there's various levels that you can navigate, from beginning level to more complex things, like for adults with the dating advice. And it just helps you run through different scenarios in life and talks you through it. You can use autism for 10% off, and you can cancel at any time. Would you mind just starting and telling us about yourself, even before becoming a parent, and just what led you into autism?
Sure. Yeah, no, I think like most parents, autism was something I was aware of, before my first son was born, and I was really hoping to avoid it. Right. So I kind of, my wife and I had our first son, and he was born. Um, Everything was going great. The issues with when he was born, perfect APGAR scores, his health seemed really good. But it was around around 13 months is when things started really changing for him. So basically, long story short, he was diagnosed eventually moderate borderline severe autism. And I think from my standpoint, it shifted everything. And I just knew that if I would have stayed the parent I was when he received that diagnosis, if I didn't make any shifts, I know for a fact he would not be the young man he is now. So that's why, for me, it is about my son, which is why autism became relevant. And I tend not even to use that term so much as because it's just is a label based on, if you check enough boxes. And I just really learned that effectively, forgetting about the label, every child has challenges and opportunities for growth. And it's a parent's job to try to discern what's happening with their child and what might be useful. So the high level summary with my son is he, compared to when he was diagnosed with moderate borderline severe autism, he's wildly unrecognizable now. The young man, the child who lost his words, and I really was convinced he would never speak, he does now talk more than anyone I know. He's a happy, joyful kid, a young man now. And I just know he would not be where he is now if I didn't shift. If I stayed in the parenting mode that I was in, how I was programmed, I know he would be much in a much different situation now. So again, I'm very grateful for so much that's happened in my life, including that autism diagnosis, which was a wake-up call to parent very differently and to operate with much more acceptance, love, and determination. So I know I'm kind of broad brushing it, but yes, I would not be doing this work if it wasn't for the diagnosis of my son. And I've spent, basically 16 years trying to figure out how to help parents respond in a much more powerful and effective way, which doesn't mean throwing the kitchen sink at the child. It just means shifting how you're operating in a way that helps promote connection, love, acceptance. And if your child's dealing with medical issues and challenges, and there's root causes that are going on, I think it's really useful for a parent to get clear on what those root causes might be that manifest as something that people give a label to, like autism. And if you channel your time, energy, and money on those things, progress accelerates, because it's very easy for you to take your time, energy, especially, and squander it as a parent on worry, on being frustrated, on this can be a super challenging journey for many parents. And while I honor the journey that anyone's on, and it's okay to feel whatever you feel, there is a way of navigating this journey that feels much better, that feels lighter, and there's a way of channeling what you do have into actions that actually move the needle in a positive way for your child, for yourself, for your family. And that's what I'm dedicated to doing.
The use of lighter right there makes me think, because a lot of parents seem restricted, and like there's definitely a lot of weight, and kind of like maybe even just stuck, wading through mud and so forth. But I'm really fascinating on your little shift there, because that's all internal. Like, how did you come to the moment where you realized that you had to shift?
Right. Great question. And I would just say before I answer that, the weight that you mentioned, that I mentioned, what I know for sure is that that weight is 99% self-generated. In other words, the weight is not what's happening to you, to your child. It's all self-generated, which sucks that's the reality. And again, that's my opinion, but it's also incredibly hopeful, because if you're generating it, hey, you can stop today. You can reduce, you can empty the load or lighten that backpack today. And again, that's really where I focus my energy. So
It's the book you have right in front of you or behind you by Carol Dweck.
yeah,
Mindset.
yeah.
Humans create things and we can attach to those and it will just destroy us. It's all right here.
No question, no question. And that's where mindset, you hear it now and it's almost cliche, like people, oh yeah, positive mindset, all that. But really, I mean, if your mindset is not aligned to where you want to go, immediately you're generating friction. Full stop. So mindset's not just kind of a concept to kind of be aware of. You actually have to implement it. You have to truly adopt that growth mindset that she talks about in that book. And it's kind of scary, because a growth mindset, ultimately, if you fast forward, what does that really mean? That means falling in love with making mistakes and being okay, more than okay with that, seeing mistakes as a sign that you're learning, you're growing, you're figuring out what doesn't work. And that's hard if you're parenting and you feel like the stakes are high and you can't mess this up for your child. The idea of making a mistake is beyond frightening, which is why most parents, like was at the time, I was just desperately wanting someone just tell me what to do. Right? I don't want the baton. I don't want the ball. I'd rather you just tell me what to do, and I'll implement. But I didn't want that responsibility, and that's where you can't have that strategy, because no one knows your child better than you. And you can have great advisors, medical doctors, functional medicine or MAPS type practitioners or therapists. I mean, there's a lot of people to have on your team, but nobody replaces you as the parent in terms of making great decisions. And you can't make great decisions if you're trapped in a fixed mindset. And none of us parents volunteer and say, yes, I'm going to switch into victim mentality. But we do. And the key is course correcting rapidly, because if you stay there, you can't help your child. They need you to lead. They don't need you to have a pity party and kind of staying stuck with your own crap. They need you to help lead the way. And again, that's an opportunity for any parent.
Yeah, that's well said. That's very cool. Uh,
You had asked me though, what was the pivotal moment, I think. So I'd like to be mindful to answer your question. And I can't say there was one specific. I mean, honestly, my wife Cass and I, early on, we aligned with the concept that we were going to do what it took to help our child, even if that meant inconvenient, expensive. Like, we were going to do what it takes. And I think so many parents have that posture. And we've just had some really good influences early on, who helped us see things a little bit differently. The way I always describe it is, if I parented my son Rye the way I was parented, right? The way I was programmed to parent by what I experienced as a child, what I saw my parents doing. And they weren't perfect, but they were phenomenal parents. But they had a playbook, which many people in that generation had a playbook of how you were with your kids. If I took that crappy playbook and tried to apply that with my son, no way. There was no way that was going to work. It didn't mean my parents' playbook was bad. It may have been appropriate for at the time, but right now I just knew for my son that would never work. So I think ultimately the shift for me came when I realized, as I mentioned before, No one is coming. There's no practitioner that we're going to see who's going to say, okay, here it is. And so, and I think my wife, Cass, she stepped into that knowledge earlier than I. It took me longer because I really did feel like, um, as a dad, don't do anything. This will get better without us, you know, going down rabbit holes. I was very averse to, you know, like I wasn't very curious. Like I didn't want to do the research. I didn't want to understand it better. I just wanted somebody to tell me what to do. So there was a moment in there, that I realized, wait a second, me getting to a clearer place to make better decisions and being comfortable doing that is not optional. That's essential. And so that helped me get into that, to raise my hand to get into that CEO role of the decision maker instead of looking to hire some consultants to come in and tell me what to do. Right. So that was the shift. And then the second big shift is that I knew for myself how hard this felt in so many ways. And a lot of it comes down, for me, it came down to the beliefs I was holding, right? And the subconscious stories I was telling myself. And that's a big part of how I help parents now, because it's these stories, these programs, which is different than mindset, by the way. Mindset's more your attitude, right? How you're approaching it. But your beliefs, that's the programs that are running below the surface. And most people, especially me, I had no clue what my beliefs were. So becoming aware more of how I was programmed gave the opportunity for me to shift. And that's a big part of how I support parents to reveal their beliefs. I don't force them to change their beliefs, but I help them go through a process where they get revealed because they're below the surface. And with that, parents can shift dramatically. And that's what I mean when I say they can take a whole bunch of stuff out of their backpack immediately that's weighing them down. And it's within that beliefs area that what moved the needle most for me was I had a belief that was playing that resulted in me getting frustrated with my son or really down on myself. And ultimately, that belief was that in some way I was a lousy parent. I was failing my son. So it was not a belief I was holding about my son. It was a belief I was holding about myself. And so the shift for me that made the biggest difference is, number one, to recognize I was being a great parent. I was doing what I could. I wasn't perfect, but I was a great parent. So I didn't, and I didn't have to beat myself up to motivate myself to become better. Like I could continue to progress and become better and better at parenting my son without beating myself up, because that was how I was adding weight to my own pack. So I think that's where the inflection point for me was: one, no one is coming, and two, I can become the parent I want to be, the parent I think my son needs now, and I don't have to use negative self-talk or really like internally beat myself up to try to get me to a higher level. I could ascend to that higher level with kindness toward myself. And I feel like so many parents, a big part of the journey is their feelings about themselves, that they experience negative feelings when they're by themselves. It's those lonely times in the journey that can feel the hardest. And again, parents they can change that rapidly.
Yeah, self awareness is a big part of change. And I think it's the first step. It's self awareness. You have to be aware of who you are, what you are, and then self acceptance. You have to accept that, and then you can change. I like Carl Rogers for that. And I
Yeah.
also like attitude and effort are mine, not anybody else's. They're mine. So I get to control those two things. And essentially, that's all we can control is our attitude and our effort. That's the only things that we can control. The value part of being a parent and seeing our child, that gives us a greater chance of kind of going down that path of that feeling hopeless and helpless. I think value determines that. So that ought to be a good signal. That means it's valuable to you. It's important to you. So how to fix it. And let's go see Len and how to fix it. How old was your son Rye at this point where you made that shift?
Yeah, so he was diagnosed when he was 18 months, and we started. I went to my first autism conference. My wife thought it was a good idea for me to go while she held fort at home, and I was at my first autism conference when he was around 3, and then I would say the shifts in my mind, and at least personally for me, happened, because I started getting educated, started seeing more possibilities of what was happening than I was, than if you stayed the conventional route. And I would say when he was around 5 or 6 is when, thanks to some of the people that we worked with and some of the organizations, there are many, too many to mention right now. I think that's where I got into this place where, wait a second, there is a better path. I'm going to lighten my load now through a few key moves, the ones I mentioned. And so I think that was kind of my inflection point, probably when my son was around 5. But basically, those first, 2 or 3 years were hard, were chaotic, and who do you trust? What do you do? What's the next step? So I think there was a lot of chaos before at least I started feeling more momentum and more confidence in my ability to navigate and make great decisions.
Confidence is a big word there. Yeah, yeah. That's a
And false confidence doesn't work. You can't pretend.
Yeah, you won't believe it. You'll eventually not believe it. Very transient type of thing there. That's incredible. So you mentioned earlier that he's shifted from nonverbal to verbal. Can you tell us about that process?
Sure. Yeah. Now with him, he had like every child, very unique set of things that were happening for him. And from a language perspective, that took a while for that to turn around. But really, for us, he had more obvious physical issues that were going on. He had huge GI issues that needed to be addressed. It's interesting now when I talk about things, and I don't mean to discount or to sound arrogant, but for my son, the autism was a lesser problem compared to his life-threatening allergies. So my son also, he basically, all around the same time, not only did we find out that or get the diagnosis that he was on the autism spectrum, but that's also around the time that we found out he has life-threatening severe allergies, to peanuts and soy, and high allergies to wheat and tree nuts and all. I mean, the list goes on and on. Basically, what happened is his GI system was so wrecked that he basically became allergic to anything that he ate. So we had a lot of physical issues that we were trying to help him with. So his lack of speech existed until those issues started to become addressed. So very much physically, he was unwell. And once he started to improve, that's when we started to see speech reemerge. And, I don't know if you want to go down this road or not, but basically for him, we tried everything medically to help him with his GI issues. And some things helped a little bit, but he was on a liquid medical food for about 1.5 years because he couldn't eat any regular foods. And nothing really helped with respect to that. And the thing that literally changed his course, his trajectory overnight, was homeopathy. So a modality that most people would think is nonsense. I totally thought it was nonsense, implausible, can't work. And homeopathy turned out to be an incredibly important piece. And again, that's something that my wife Cass was curious about, was kind of making her the case for, and I dismissed it. And fortunately, I had the good sense to say, okay, I'm going to not resist this. Let's try this. And there's no downside, and it could be a waste of time. But I was open enough and smart enough to at least not get in the way, and that changed everything for him.
How did your wife learn about that?
Well, she responds and moves quick. So she was looking at all kinds of different options. And, even the autism conference, which was a Defeat Autism Now conference back in the day, that was the organization that was moving. And it wouldn't have been my idea to go to that conference. I would have found some reason to be skeptical and say it's not going to be worth the time. But she found out about that, and again, I learned a lot there, including, they talked a bit about homeopathy there. But I think just in her research, she was just very thorough, and was more open and to the more energetic approaches. Again, I have more of an analytical mind, more of a skeptical mind, and so um, it wouldn't have been something I would have thought, hey, this is worth pursuing. But I'm so glad we did.
Yeah, it's incredible because that mother instinct. There's a lot to the mother instinct with the autism with the autistic child.
No doubt. And it's funny because with the work that I now do, one-on-one coaching, and it's me coaching and advice. I don't even like to call it coaching because it's much more advisory, because it's really about helping the parent rise. I do that as a male, knowing that for the parents that I have the honor of walking alongside, that the intuition of both parents is incredibly important, but especially the maternal intuition. It's you can't discount that, you can't bury that. And so I'm a big fan of helping mom or dad, but especially mom, to walk into what I would call informed intuition. Because intuition's great, but sometimes intuition can kind of, for whatever reason, be radically off. So I think that's where this awareness that you mentioned earlier, stepping into a greater sense, here's what's going on in a detailed way with my child. Here are the options. Here are the roads we can go down. And especially, here are the root causes that I think might be at play to focus on. If you get to that greater informed state, then it's like, okay, now where do I sense is the right area to focus on? And that's where the intuition, particularly maternal intuition, comes into play. Whenever Cass and I would have a disagreement in terms of which road to go down, we would both make our case and had respectful conversations. But if there was a tie, the tie went to the maternal intuition, not the paternal intuition.
Well done, Len. Well said. I maybe I shouldn't assume, but that comes from experience.
Yeah.
That's so freaking fun. How was your son going through school and so forth, and how were you as a parent during the school years, like especially early on elementary and so forth?
Yeah, our road was a little bit unique. He early on, um, we did a home-based program for him when he was younger, like around 5. We did the Sunrise program, which is one that some people may be aware of, but it's basically a child-centered program, and it's home-based, so he wasn't at a school. But then we moved into more of a private school, like a community type environment that was much smaller class size, and and really a good fit for him. And then by the time he got to 5th grade, the town we were living in at the time had a dynamite public school with really great teachers at that grade level. And I mean, I honestly never thought my son would be in a public school. Like, I didn't think that was, I wanted that. That was actually what early on, that was my goal. I'm like, if he could be in a public school with no support, victory, right? Mission accomplished. And that happened in 5th grade. He went to 5th grade and had a phenomenal year. And again, it was because it was a fit. The school was, the right teachers, right environment. And he thrived in elementary school for a couple years. And at that point, he was ready for it. He had the skills to do that. And that's because we spent a lot of time, early on with the home program, and also helping him to learn the skills that he needed to be successful in that type of environment. So it wasn't just the schools taught him and we did nothing at home. We were doing a lot at home to help him learn what he needed to learn to be successful, because I didn't want him just to be in a public school, but then have all kinds of scaffolding around him. I wanted it to be a fit where he was able to navigate on his own. And fortunately, he was. And that was an incredible experience for him for a couple of years. And then after that, he then progressed more to different community schools, which are basically public schools, but with a different philosophy that we have in our state. And now he's 18 and just finishing his last year of high school. And for the last few years, he's been in more of a homeschool environment, with a teacher that's got a relatively smaller class size and different grades, kind of in one place, which is a much better fit for how he learns.
Yeah, that's an incredible story. Circling back to the speech, him developing speech, was it just based off of the settling all those more life threatening problems, and then you could work on certain interventions, or did we capture what helped his speech come about, or no?
Well, I think what I was inferring is that as his body became more functioning the way it was meant to, because he was literally failure to thrive, nothing was working. So the developmental issues were hugely impacted by his physical health issues. So I think once his body started to get more regulated, right, and more operating the way it was designed to, which again, medicine didn't work, conventional medicine didn't work, but an energetic approach like homeopathy, literally he transformed the next day. He started his upward progression. I think as then his body got stronger, then yes, he was able to do many more things, including the speech started to slowly return. Now, clearly he was doing speech therapy and doing a number of things at the time. But I guess the life-threatening allergy piece of it, which is still an issue, by the way, but that forced our hand to take food seriously. So to feed him nourishing food that doesn't have poisons and toxins in it, and that meet the needs that he has, that he uniquely had from a nutritional standpoint, focusing on food, prioritizing quality food, non-toxic food, that was a huge part of him having the building blocks to progress in all kinds of areas, including communication and speech.
Okay, nicely done, nicely said too. Yeah, I've noticed a little theme, and you go root cause or upstream. I think about going upstream to see how these things are being kind of how they manifest, because we like to treat that. We like to treat downstream, but we don't ever talk about the root cause, and I think that's missed. And you elegantly said that a couple of different times, and I just want to thank you for that.
Yeah, well, I thank you for identifying that, and that really, to bottom line this, I mean, that I don't want to call this a game, but let's just say it's a game. It's a game for parents to figure out ultimately what decisions make sense, and the powerful strategy is to have a root cause approach, to be obsessed with identity. That doesn't mean you can't address symptoms. Of course you can. You can do therapies, you can do supplement, whatever the case may be, but to really have a very educated guess on what are the few, not the 20, but the few root causes that are relevant for my child, why they're exhibiting and presenting the way they are. That is how you accelerate progress. And that's again, that goes back to my prior career, where especially when my son was diagnosed, I was working in New York City for the behemoth banks. I was a kind of a CPA, a controller, a CFO, and then ultimately these banks, because it was merger after merger, ultimately these banks were horribly functioning. Like the processes at these banks, were horrible, because there was just these different organizations put together with paper clips and rubber bands. So I shifted from a more of a financial type role to fixing the broken processes that were preventing the company from running well. So ultimately, I wound up getting certified as a Six Sigma Master Black Belt, somebody who's really good at re-engineering processes at these dysfunctional organizations, and basically creating processes that yield no defects. So it's ironic that at the time I got the diagnosis for my son, my job was to help banks run better and to have processes that didn't result in defects. And here I get the diagnosis for my son, which was basically a 7-page letter that said, your son is defective. And so it was, hard to hear. And that's where I kind of got into fix it mode, which also doesn't work in terms of trying to fix your child, right? It's all about meeting your child's needs. But but what I learned in my corporate career and what I was doing was all about how do you re-engineer how these these companies operate, and I'm taking that expertise and now I'm pointing it directly at parents, because we all show up with a certain capacity for good decision making, but our processes for how we take an information, how we analyze it and then decide what to do with it, I know I didn't have a really good process for that. I stayed stuck and again wanted other people to make those decisions for me. And so that's why I feel like this is a huge unsolved problem that most people don't even know they have, that their ability to take what's going on and then to ultimately have a plan they feel good about and to execute it well. I feel like every parent has an opportunity to improve that. And that's where everything I do is focused on that transformation of the parent as being the greatest intervention they can do for their child.
It's a good fit. It's a good trait, like your analytic mind.
It's
Yeah,
putting
with
it's putting it to better use, that's for sure.
yeah, it absolutely is. And not to say that the professional role isn't useful too, but like there's something different about like serving humanity and especially serving our children. That is life. That's where life happens. And you're doing a wonderful job of that. It's just fun to like listen to you convey that out, and just the beauty behind it and the passion is very, very nice to see. At what point did you think about the podcast? Could you just walk us through the moment you started to even just think about it, and then the process of beginning the podcast? Because it's very successful. I think episode, correct me if I'm wrong, 277 came out today. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think it may be 280, 286 might be today. And
Oh,
yeah, no,
280.
it's been a labor of love. And I guess the origin of it probably, months after my son was diagnosed is when, I was just very frustrated that there weren't really any great resources to help parents. And I knew, especially when things were the hardest for my son, I didn't have time for anything. Like I wouldn't have had time to sign up for coaching. Are you kidding? Like, there's no way. But in all the chaos, I was doing research. My wife was doing research online, and that's great. But I just felt parents needed something to be able to hear and that would help them in a positive way, and it had to be easy for them to digest. And that's where, no matter how chaotic my life got, I could always put on a pair of headphones and listen to something. So the podcast, the audio medium itself for me was the strongest, which is why even to this day, every episode I have having guests on, I have a full video of it, but I never created a YouTube channel. I don't put those videos out there. It's still mainly an audio medium.
Yeah.
And at some point, maybe I will, but otherwise, I think it's the easiest to take in information. And again, I wanted something that parents can listen to and walk away not more dysregulated, right? Like to walk away with more insight, more understanding, more ways of how they can apply it in a positive way. And sometimes I have guests on who talk about an option maybe that isn't a fit, and that's where I tell parents, listen, you don't have to do everything that every guest who comes on says. I mean, they make the case, but you decide, and it's okay. I think being regulated as a parent to me means being really clear that you know what you're doing, why you're doing it, and you feel good about it. And especially you're okay with all the much longer list of things that you're not doing. You need to be feeling good about what you're doing and what you're not doing, for at least for my nervous system to calm down. And that's a big part of what I like to help parents get to. But yeah, the podcast itself, I just felt like that was the best way of taking what my wife and I were learning and sharing that so that people can have these insights, have the knowledge of this this very different way of navigating the journey. People needed that earlier, and it shouldn't take everyone a dozen years like it did me to kind of figure this out. We wanted to make sure people had that information earlier. And again, it's all about how they're navigating and making decisions. It's not because there's no right or wrong about what you do for your child. But in my opinion, I say respectfully, there is a right and a wrong way of how you navigate. There's a way of navigating that creates the friction that we talked about earlier, and that just keeps adding weight to your backpack. which can only lead to burnout in some form or another. And as a way of navigating, again, that just feels lighter, that enables you to course correct quicker, and to, again, constantly figure out ways of modifying how you are so that you can make better and better decisions for your child. And that is absolutely possible. So that's where I think how you navigate, to me, is more important than what you do. You got to get that how figured out first, and then you're off to the races to figure out what are the best moves for you and your family and your child.
Yeah. Neuroscience, that's noise. All that other stuff is noise. And then signal is what you're sending your spotlight of attention to. And that's crucial here. Yeah. And it goes back to the attitude and effort thing. It's like your attitude, your attention has to be on that goal, not what you could have done, not those other possibilities.
Right.
Maybe those will come in to play later, but not right now. Yeah, and thanks for correcting me too on the episode 286, because I remember, I think 277 was with Tristan from Daylight, and that's why it stuck with me. Yeah, Tristan is fantastic. And your last two episodes were about EMF. So that's an unseen and very harmful kind of phenomenon that we're navigating as humans right now, is the EMFs.
Yeah, and it may be lost on some people why EMFs, how they enter the picture. I know it's not lost on you, but again, for a parent in a house with a child with complex challenges, a big part of how you can navigate better is by playing better defense against stressors, particularly in the house. And EMFs are just a huge one, without a doubt, that is behind a lot of the dysregulated behavior, at least a contributing factor. So again, here, knowledge of what's going on in your home is really important, and then doing something about it. And some of the actions, most of the actions that you can take to play better defense don't cost anything. They're free, they're easy. Sure, you can spend a lot of money and go full throttle, but it's just about playing not perfect defense, but better defense. Whether we're talking about EMFs or mold in the house or chemicals and other toxins, that's a key part of it. The key part is curating an environment that allows for everyone in your family to thrive, including yourself.
Yeah. Humans, we love to make sense of things that we can see and understand. We can't see these EMFs all around our environment, but they are harmful. And just like unplugging the Wi-Fi is going to be something that people can do, and it's a success. You might not see the benefits of it. I think eventually you will, with just the way we are, like with our mood and our energy and so forth. But it's just simple steps like that could help, like, create this bigger picture and, create momentum, because we're closing a loop. We're doing something progressive or productive. And the EMFs is just, it just complicates because we can't see it. It's not like we burn our hand and it's like, okay, I can't put my hand in fire anymore because my hand's burnt. I felt it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like that at all. There's some great data on EMF too, which is unknown, which is, I want to ask you about, unless you wanted to follow up with the EMF.
I just wanted to say one thing about EMF, and then I definitely would love for you to ask the question you're about to ask. With EMFs, there's some confusion in terms of like why it matters. It's not likely that EMFs, let's say, are the root cause of what's happening with your child. If you're trying to dial in what's at the root. Now, for some kids, it might be. For my son, it may be, because I had that wireless, digital television monitor when he was born right off of his crib, and that thing was exerting a lot. So he was getting a lot of stress. But it's unlikely, I think, that EMF exposure might be a root cause that's relevant for why your child's presenting the way they are. It could be, but the key way of looking at EMFs right now is that maybe it's not a top root cause of what's happening with your child, like that started everything, but it very well might be a root cause of why your child doesn't make more progress now, if they're in an environment that is creating just a much more stressful environment that's just going to dysregulate their nervous system more. So that's a way of looking at EMFs, not necessarily a root cause of going back to why your child has the diagnosis they have, but it very well can be a root cause of why progress is slow or why everyone's staying stuck. And just from my work with parents, it's crazy how often the highest EMF exposures are in the bedroom where that child particularly is sleeping. So when we use meters and test the environment, other rooms, the parents' bedroom, other kids, their levels of exposure are in that room are always lower than the child who's got these issues. And again, once parents take some measures to reduce that, behaviors improve, sleep improves, and there's nothing more important than sleep in terms of how do you help anyone become the best that they can be.
Yeah, these EMFs are on the electromagnetic field, the microwave level, and it goes back to, we surround our babies with these devices so we can monitor them, and it's an attempt to protect them and allow us to have kind of better access to them to eliminate dangers. But these EMFs, like you mentioned, that's a good example of that monitor too, because I anticipate those are very popular. But these EMFs are destroying cells, and with autism, things like cells and the EMFs dehydrate cells and myelination. They destroy lipid, and it's so this EMF exposure could cancel out things that you're doing and cancel out the natural development, like what your son had.
Yep, 100%. That myelination is important. We could have an entire episode just talking about this topic, but it's not conjecture. I mean, the research has been done. Professor Dr. Paul is the one who did the pioneering research, probably I think about 5 years ago, that demonstrated how electromagnetic fields, particularly how do they impact cells, as you said, right? And it ultimately is about these voltage gated calcium channels within the cell, and the EMF exposure allows an excess amount of calcium to get into the cell, and then that creates oxidative stress. And how does that oxidative stress manifest? How do you see it? Well, you very well may see it in the behaviors and symptoms that we label as ADHD or autism or Parkinson's or Alzheimer's. Again, every person's going to, that oxidative stress is going to manifest differently. So it's not conjecture. There's a lot here, and that's why we can't avoid it, right? We live in an environment, there's natural EMFs, there's a lot of man-made. It's just about playing better defense. And you can significantly minimize without, moving off the grid. You can minimize exposure. And again, if that parent's going to do anything here, just make sure the sleeping environment is protected.
Yeah, Mercola, your book EMF right behind you is he's excellent on that. And you had CC on, and I've never heard of CC, but I'd listened, and she is one of the few people that I've heard mention going away with Section 704.
Yes.
And that is a big thing. John Coates of RF Safe is huge on this too. He's dedicated his life for this exposure, and this 704 is it's significant. It's protection. It's almost like, to me, the vax safety of 1986, but different context. It's just providing protection because it's known of the potential harms. So I guess maybe what I would want to ask is, how can we bring 704 out to the public knowledge? Do you have any ideas on how to bring that into awareness more?
Yeah, well, the episode with Cece, she talks about it. I mean, it really comes down to getting informed. Go to that website. I think it's 704nomore.org. And again, it comes down to an individual parent. If you feel like you get educated and this is an issue, it's all about spreading the word, talking to your school, talking to, decision makers, government officials. Again, nobody wants to know this is true. Nobody wants this. Again, this is a hard area because it's so inconvenient, and nobody wants to be judged as overreactive or a lunatic. But again, there's real science on this. There's real science in both of the areas you mentioned, whether it's the vaccine schedule or whether it's EMF exposure or other, potential toxins in there. It's easy to be judged as being overreactive, but the key is to get informed, to share this information, and a lot of it, particularly schools, I think are becoming more open. Because I know with my son's school, I tried to make the case to them, this was the public school. I tried to make the case to them about the importance of the Wi-Fi routers in the classrooms, which were everywhere, and even something like solar panels on the roof of these schools. A lot of these schools have all classes are wired for Wi-Fi, so huge amounts of wireless, radio frequencies, which is radiation. So you have that going on. Sometimes they have the solar panels on the roof, which generate a huge amount of dirty electricity, which is the worst of all four EMF types. And then a lot of them also now have the towers, the 5G. Not only the towers, but they're smaller. They're placing them on schools. They're placing them on churches. And again, we'd like to think that this stuff's invisible and therefore it doesn't harm. But all you need to do is have the right meter. And you can see we're not talking about just slightly high levels. We're talking about exponentially, in which Dr. Mercola talks a lot about in that book. And so I do think parents getting informed and trying to educate schools, local government officials, I think initially there's a lot of resistance because nobody wants to admit there's a problem because that means they have to do something about it. And maybe they want to do something about it, but they just may not have the funding to do it. So it's better to pretend there's no problem. But no, I think it's word of mouth, and it's pointing people to sources of information where they can look at the science themselves and look at the research. And again, you have to recognize there's a problem in order for you ever even to remotely start to do something about it. So it's that awareness that's a super important, which is why groups like 704nomore.org are indispensable.
Yeah, okay. Um, Not only the Wi-Fi connections and the cell towers, and you can see cell towers and communication towers right by schools now, and it's very concerning. But they're getting Chromebooks, things like tech devices, and that's very harmful as well. So to backtrack a little bit, something a parent can do is just not have the tech devices on for the children, because children are more vulnerable to that. I mean, the blue light goes through the skull much more for the infant, the younger child. And that's something that you can do that's zero cost and very helpful. But, but Google has a patent on screens, monitors destroying this human central nervous system on humans. This is public information. You can Google this. I'll put it in the show notes. But they know about it, and nothing is done. It's very concerning.
No doubt. No doubt. It's, as you said, there's easy things you can do to maybe hardwire something that's wireless, turning the wireless off. All this stuff is inconvenient. And bottom line, Ryan, I've learned from all the parents I've coached that parents have a lot of fears. There's things they're worried about, judgments from other people. And, we can go down a list of things that people are fearful of. But honestly, the top thing I think most parents are fearful of is inconvenience. We've gotten so used to things being quick and easy that, wait, this is going to take some steps that I need to take. I don't want to do that, or hard conversations. And I say that with respect because nobody was allergic to inconvenience as I was, right? I wanted everything to be convenient, but all the moves that we made for our son, they were all inconvenient. And I'm glad that I got over the resistance to. So I think if parents can embrace inconvenience, at least to some extent, it'll open up so much more for them. And anything you're doing with respect to minimizing EMFs, if you turn the router off at night, that's inconvenient. It takes effort. You can put it on a timer, so it's not that difficult. But if you're hardwiring a laptop or a Chromebook instead of using Wi-Fi, yeah, it takes a few extra steps, but it is so worth it, especially if you can see through the measurement how much less is coming at your child. And you're 100% right. Children developing and growing brains much more susceptible to harm from this than us as adults. Doesn't mean it's still not hurting us in many ways we don't feel, perhaps, but particularly for a child, playing better defense is key. And one key thing I do want to highlight, though, is you're right that you wouldn't want to be living in a house with a huge tower, right? A cell tower, you know, you're close to it. Like if you can see it from your house, okay, that's probably a flag that says maybe this isn't the right neighborhood to live in, this or the right house. But I would say that cell tower, even if it's close, is nothing compared to what you're generating inside your house with your own router. So if you measure the impact from that distant cell tower versus what you're doing in house, you can't compare, which is why within the house is the key to take control over. And again, there's super easy, simple things you can do to play better defense. And everyone in the house will benefit, particularly sleep. Sleep will become more restorative, higher quality. And that alone is going to translate into you feeling better as the parent, your child feeling more regulated, perhaps less behaviors, more focus. Quality sleep, there's nothing more magical than that. So that's where playing better defense in the sleeping environment here with respect to EMFs is something, in my opinion, it's a must-do move, and not that much effort and huge returns day after day.
Yeah, and it's not a parent problem. We're in no way saying like the parent is not putting in effort or is being bad. That's a human nature thing with that inconvenience. That's very human nature, and it's across the board. It's universal. Humans like the convenience. The
Oh,
whole
yeah.
role of the brain is to just respond. It doesn't like to work either. That's why change is hard, and that's why this so-called inconvenience has that friction that you mentioned earlier. It's just the design of the central nervous system. I love how you parsed out too with these other conditions because if we just zoom out and look over like the last 50 years, like with the dementias and the heart diseases, heart attacks, the autism, the ADHD, all of these things are just manifesting from sure some environmental insults, or mostly environmental insults, but they all kind of find or follow the same trend, and it's very telling that our environment is no good, and in large part is some of those EMFs, and then like the vax schedule too that humans kind of injected into other people. So I want to ask you about, because you mentioned this a couple of times, how do you go about parsing out, let's say, research? Because we can basically find research that says anything now. How do you parse out fact from things that are just like false or maybe bought, jeopardized, so forth?
Yeah, I mean the discernment on what research to believe and what not, that's a bit tricky, right? And that's where again, I think the guidance from advisors around you who maybe have gotten to a place where they can help you discern that, right? So the right medical practitioner or researcher. So you can go to PubMed and yeah, there's a lot of information, but you got to look at who authored the study. Was it funded by the pharmaceutical industry or not? So again, to try to find really in the truly independent, meaningful research, that can be challenging. And I'll be honest, I didn't spend hours and hours doing that research. So I have relied on opinions of people who I respect, who I know don't have an agenda, and so again, and everything that I personally do, it's always from the standpoint of root cause, root cause, root cause. What does the research say with respect to root cause? And I'd be lying to you if I said, okay, hey, I know the root cause of autism. That'd be an idiotic thing for anyone to say. But, I could never say that to you. But what I can say is that, hey, there's some very likely suspects that we can point to say this, there may be something here in terms of what is driving the autism epidemic, and translating into that. And again, we don't have to talk about any of them. I'll just spitball a whole bunch of real strong candidates, right? So we do have things like EMF exposure and how much more that is, particularly if you go back to the inflection point, when things really started to turn. The EMF exposure that our kids are susceptible? Huge. The chemicals and pesticides and all the toxins in the air that are in the cord blood, of these children is massive. So you can just look at as a root cause the whole chemical onslaught, how much toxic, like these kids are born with their toxin cup already pretty filled. So you can look and say that's a cause. You can look at the vaccine schedule in terms of metals or whatever the case may be. You can look at that. You can look at glyphosate in terms of the glyphosate and how insidious that is, how that wrecks the gut health. And so I could keep going on and on. There's a lot of things that you can point to that say, hey, that might be a big contributing root cause to how different the environment is now. And I think as a parent, it's just about you understanding those factors. And again, getting tuned in with, hey, well, what's relevant for my child? Let me try to focus on that root cause. Like Dr. William Parker was on the podcast a couple months ago before the big announcement from HHS about Tylenol. And, he's 100% convinced that Tylenol, consumption, particularly by the mother, during pregnancy, he's convinced that's a massive, and he doesn't think that's a contributing factor. He feels like that's really a key root cause. And then, of course, if that's true, the question is, well, what do we do about it? Well, there's ways that you can support your child if that did contribute to toxicity and is in some way a root cause for what's going on with your child. But again, every parent can look at their unique situation and say, hey, I feel like these root causes are contributing factors. Now let me come up with a plan to take actions that might help with that knowledge that might be at the root of why my child is where they are right now.
Yeah. Okay. Well said. Again, because there's so much. Those topics though are very prevalent or it's like the spotlight there. Those things that you mentioned, especially with that Tylenol. Yeah. The vaccine. Have you had any podcast episodes about the vaccines or no?
Oh, sure. Oh, if you look at my podcast ratings, from 1 to 5 stars, all the non-5-star ones are people who are screaming and yelling that we had an anti-vaxxer on the podcast. So no,
don't you love the labels? I love the labels. Anti-vaxxer. It's like, what does that mean?
And I don't know what that means. And even like one episode, that guest didn't even talk about vaccines, but just because they were on and they were known as and I think that's shifting now where people are aware, hey, listen, there's something here. The vaccines are playing some role. And, we're maybe now doing the research, thanks to RFK Jr., to really see, hey, what role are they playing? How is it? Again, nobody knows anything with any certainty. The key is to do the science and let the science truly speak, to do objective science, and have a government organization that does that work that's not captured. So I think there's so many positive things in terms of what we might truly learn. So I think, I'll just leave it at that.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, it's for some reason it's so sensitive, but I think people get brainwashed because, the centralized controllers, the people that make the profit, also control the narrative. They also control the direction of the research. Mm-hmm. It's like, it's too much. It's just too much. They control too much. And those narratives, because, we've talked about how humans, we like to believe things and make it easier for us. And it's just like repetition. So that just becomes the norm. And it's like, it's a very covert way of establishing friction amongst each other on like our level.
Right.
And that just distracts problem.
Yeah, but in answer to your question, I've had some phenomenal guests, again, who don't come on the show proclaiming that vaccinations are horrible. They just say, hey, here is what's known, here's what's not known. So people like Dr. Christiane Northrup has been on and hit this topic. Dr. Peter McCullough, who's quite even more outspoken and doing incredible work. And again, they're just sharing their perspective. And this is for parents just, again, to get educated on the case for, the case against, and ultimately, to make informed consent and a good educated choice about what's right for their child. And that's why, even though I've had these people on, and for my son personally, when he was diagnosed and his health was really horrible, his pediatrician gave a medical exemption from vaccines because it was so clear how, particularly the MMR vaccine, didn't work as intended for him. Basically, measles, mumps, and rubella set up shop in his body. And so we had the documented evidence. Now it'd be very hard for that same pediatrician to give a medical exemption today. It was easier back then when we experienced it. But so I think with respect to vaccination and my son, that was clearly a piece of what was happening for him. And I think for anyone listening, the question is what's relevant for your child? Because just because I've had people on my podcast who happen to be skeptical or wanting more research, again, when I coach parents, I don't advise them on whether to vaccinate or not. I just want them to get into the clearest position to decide what makes sense for your child. It doesn't have anything to do with what I would prefer. And so I frustrate clients a lot because I keep saying, you don't want to hear what I would do. Like, I want to help you get clear on what you choose to do. And so whether that's with the vaccine schedule or even medication, my son, medication didn't work for him. And so we tried it and it just wasn't a fit, his body. And there's some people who are very adamant against medication. My goal is for a parent they can get in a clearer place to decide, does that make sense for them? And again, what I would do in that situation is irrelevant. I want them just to make an aligned decision based on what's going on with their child and what their values are and what they're wanting. And that's the key. It's all about the parent making decisions about what they choose to do, not me trying to direct them or influence them in any particular way.
Yeah. That oxidative stress that you mentioned too is something that not only people in autism need to become aware of or research, but everybody, because that's heavily involved in the neurocognitive phenomena that we're approaching too. Because it's like younger and younger people with getting diagnosed with dementia, younger and younger people are having heart attacks, younger and younger. It's like, hey, tell me about, maybe we'll shift gears to more recent. Tell me about your role with Dr. Bogner.
Yeah, Dr. Christian Bogner, he's a good example of, a pediatrician, right, who's focused on helping and serving these kids and these parents. And, he's more, for people who aren't familiar with him, he's definitely not a conventional doctor. He takes more of a functional approach. I think he would consider himself to be part of this more kind of MAPS type practitioner. So the Medical Academy of Pediatric Special Needs, I've had many of their leadership and their practitioners on the podcast. So Dr. Bogner similarly is about kind of more of a functional approach to what's going on with your child. And he's doing some great work in terms of serving parents, because finding the right practitioner is so incredibly important. Because in my opinion, you need a team. It's like an organization chart. You're at the top of the organization chart. You're the CEO, and you need people reporting to you. They're your direct reports, right? And for me, I feel like having a person with a medical degree as one of those advisors is key. Now, if that's a pediatrician, conventional pediatricians don't have much in their toolbox to help a child with complex conditions, which is why choosing the right practitioner, it's likely not to be a conventional medicine doctor. It might be functional medicine, which is taking more of a systems approach. And then kind of in the middle, you have an integrated practitioner, which is more of a conventional medicine doctor that just has more tools in the toolbox, including more energetic approaches or homeopathy, things like that. So a big part of my coaching is to help parents get out of their head what they're looking for in a practitioner, who would be a fit, who wouldn't be a fit. And based on their requirements, it's easy for me to share my Rolodex. Okay, here are the people who fit what you're looking for. And where Dr. Bogner comes in is he's got a really great holistic approach. He's committed to serving these parents and making it affordable, because if you do find a practitioner who's a fit, sometimes that could be a pretty expensive road. It may very well be worth the investment, But Dr. Bogner knows that there's a lot of people who want to work with a MAPS type practitioner or a functional medicine practitioner, and he's committed to trying to do it in a way where he can do it virtually, as well as making it more affordable in terms of the tests that are done, the consults. So I think what Christian's doing is phenomenal, and his partner Alex Zaharikis, who's a parent but a brilliant guy, he's created a unique stool test that basically is a gut balancing protocol that he has that's leveraging this one very simple stool test, very affordable, that helps give much more precise recommendations about what's going on with your child and what supplements or what approaches might help with improving gut health, which I think probably most of your listeners know. If the gut, if you have dysbiosis and imbalance, if the gut is kind of not in a great place, that absolutely impacts neurological functioning. So I think what Dr. Bogner and what Alex are doing is much more of an approach that's centered on kind of improving gut health. And when you do that, lots of positive changes occur.
Yeah, it's all connected. It's all very connected. At what point were you to the spot where you was like, well, I could help coach parents and kind of make this more widespread?
It's a good question. I really think early on, what I knew I couldn't do, because I'm not a great multitasker, I couldn't focus on my son and at the same time help other people. So I kind of stayed in isolation, and I always said to myself, once my son gets in a better place, then I want to find a way to help parents, because I didn't want parents to have to go through the learning curve I did. So, I think me having a desire to pay it forward probably kind of took root, probably about 5 years into the journey. I didn't know what that was going to look like. And I definitely never thought I would leave my corporate career to do this full time. But it got to a point where there was no more important work that I could do. And so I can't not do this work. And I'm just committed to finding, just like Dr. Bogner is, I want to find better and better ways of helping parents make this leap from where they are now to version 2.0, what I call parent transformation. I'm trying to find more and more ways for parents to make that shift quickly, because the sooner they do, the ROI on that for them and their child's massive. And if they become better decision makers and more resilient and more flexible, and looser and more present, I mean, that will compound in so many ways day after day after day. So I didn't think I didn't want parents to take 12 years to make that shift. And so that's where I've just found the fastest way for them to step into the parent that they're meant to be rapidly. And again, it has everything to do with them going from where they are, which is not a lowly place, but going from where they are to something significantly more capable, more confident. So, many of the parents I work with start off in significant overwhelm and they're stressed. And so they go from there to where they're moving with greater momentum and confidence. And some parents start and they're already running on all cylinders, making great decisions, feeling good about what they're doing. But this coaching then enables them to become truly unstoppable. So every parent has room for growth. And I just feel like the more parents do that, their child benefits more than any other intervention. But I think that the challenge is many parents feel guilty or selfish if they focus on themselves. It's that oxygen mask analogy. But again, if parents can just prioritize themselves first and get to that stronger place, it makes all the difference.
Can you tell us about the kind of the evolution of the podcast, from starting it, the beginning episodes, to how you built it up and to where it is now? If you had any kind of moments where it's like, we need a pivot, or you have that great sense of analytic and business mind. And then talk us through like the creation of your website. Your website is fantastic. I
Thank
love
you.
it so much. And just tell us about the evolution of the podcast.
Well, I think the podcast, I think, like a lot of things I've been learning, right? Where at some point, if you want to do something, you just got to do it, and you just improve it over time. So I thought about it for a while, and then eventually launched it, and I launched it initially with my wife, and I think it's still pretty consistent in terms of the structure. I think the thing that's shifted is that, initially the podcast, well, the podcast has always been called Autism Parenting Secrets, and that hasn't changed. And I don't like the title, by the way, because everything we talk about isn't specifically about autism. It's about, so the diagnosis doesn't matter. It's just I know I want to serve those parents, because I think autism particularly can be a very, very challenging journey. So autism's in the title because I want to reach those people, but it doesn't matter what your child might be facing, whether, whatever the diagnosis, it doesn't matter. Everything that's in the podcast is going to be equally useful. Autism is in the title. Parenting, it's not necessarily me giving parenting advice. It's just that this is for parents. And then the big secret is, because it's an intriguing title for the podcast, because what are the secrets? Well, the secrets are the insights that we share each week, and the title is always the insight. So it's very clear what every episode's about. But the uber secret is that, parent, you're the key. Whether you like it or not, it is you. And that might feel daunting, but no, you have so much power. So if you can, again, get to that stronger place rapidly, listen to the podcast, there's so much in there. That's the biggest unlock. So I think in terms of the podcast evolution, the only thing that's really shifted is initially the coaching and the way of helping parents. I called it warrior parent coaching, because warrior parent is a term that's known in the autism community, going back to Jenny McCarthy's book that she wrote early on. And I like that name, and my wife and I both like that, because it conveyed energy. It conveyed, hey, I'm going to bring my best self. But ultimately, I don't use that term anymore, because warrior conveys that you're at war with something. And, that's not the right approach. Right now, for you to be at war with autism, or to be at war with your child, or even to be at war with yourself, as I was alluding to earlier, the warrior term doesn't feel right. So that's why right now, the way I help parents one-on-one, it's all in parent coaching. And it's really, that term is specific because parents already have this huge desire to be a great parent, to make great decisions. Every single parent I've ever talked to has that desire. But what they may not have is really being all in and raising their hand on doing what's necessary. And that means working on themselves. That means having hard conversations. That means, standing out and being judged by others who aren't
Yeah.
cheering you on for what you're doing, the research you're doing, or the supplements you're giving, or whatever the case may be. So that's where the all-in term, I think, is much more relevant. But otherwise, no, I think the podcast, as it's evolved, I think I've gotten better at shutting up and letting my guests speak. And I think I've gotten good at helping to guide guests to put things in terms that the listener can understand. Sometimes you listen to a podcast and it's just, you know, it's just incomprehensible, and people are like, like the questions you might have as you're listening aren't being answered. So I think I've gotten good at keeping the conversations going in a way that makes it digestible. And again, it's not about me trying to show how much I know and impressing other people. That's not my goal. My goal is to get the most out of that guest, for them to share their perspective, and again, to ultimately land with, what can a parent do to implement? How can they take action based on this information? What's that look like? And so I think that's why the podcast has been very successful. I get lots of feedback from parents who really feel like it's a critical part. And so I'm honored that people are being positively influenced by the podcast, and it's helping them. And that was the goal. I wanted a way to convey this information in a digestible way, in a free way, and for parents to take that information, and for it in some way, shape, or form to help them as they're making the best decisions they can. And I think it's accomplished that. And I've no desire to end it anytime soon. So we're going to keep going and having dynamite guests like yourself on. I think, again, there's no criteria for who comes on the podcast. It doesn't have to be an autism expert. It's just someone with a useful perspective who truly wants the best for these listeners and to share information that's useful. And that's what it's all about.
Yeah, it's a great database. As you're sitting there explaining it, and as I'm sitting there visualizing myself navigating the website, which is fantastic. It's like a database of autism stuff, and it's very fantastic.
It is, and actually, a lot of times when I do advise parents, sometimes like what they're challenged with, it sometimes the best thing I could do is just share with them a very specific episode. So I appreciate that you said that, because it really is a library. And again, who has time to go listen to 285 episodes? But sometimes it's useful to hear the right episode at the right time, and that's where a lot of what I do is sharing the right specific episode that will hit when you're just at the right time when you're ready to receive it.
Yeah, I had a question about that. I was like, how to help direct people to your specific episodes, and yeah, you do that so well.
Well, the website, it's being changed so that the episodes now, I'm not finished with it yet, but all the episodes are being categorized in a more meaningful way. So specifically, if you're, let's say, looking for something related to EMF, right, it'd be easier to find those episodes. So yeah. So right now it's at a certain point. Not all the episodes going back to the beginning are there. Over the next few weeks, that'll all be populated. So yeah, I want to make it easier for people to find that right episode.
Well, do you envision it, or will it be like a click down, or like you click and it'll be like EMF or whatever, or is it like a search type of thing?
Yeah, right now, it would be, if you go to the website and you go to the prior episodes, it's going to list the last 10 episodes, and you can load more and see all the history. But then there's 6 buttons that are there that categorize them. So each of the episodes can be categorized. So I think depending on what you're looking for, by looking at the right category button, you'll find what you're looking for easier. But there'll be a search function eventually. And you can always just go on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and just type in Autism Parenting Secrets and then type in EMF afterwards, and you can get it that way as well. But I've had some dynamite episodes on electromagnetic fields, and again, you can't listen to those episodes and not walk away wanting to take action.
Yeah, they're well done. What is something recently you're most excited about?
Well, it's hard to not just mention what's happening at HHS, right? So I think RFK Jr. is someone I've met several times and have heard him speak countless times. He's a regular at these autism conferences, and it's not like he was coming in there and seeing an opportunity and saying stuff, placating people. I mean, he sincerely is in earnest with just wanting these agencies to do what they're supposed to do, for the real science to be done. So I couldn't be more optimistic that with him there, a lot of positive change can be accomplished, and it's already, I think, a lot that's happening. I think so. I'm very hopeful for what can happen. I'm very hopeful with respect to an organization like Children's Health Defense and what they're doing. And so again, I'm huge fans of those organizations, and I feel like we're getting to a point now where I think parents will have much more information about what's happening. A lot of these stressors, these things that are maybe contributing to the rise of or the explosion of autism, can be addressed, and we can turn the tide. And ultimately, there's just so many kids who are hampered and challenged in so many ways, and I think RFK Jr. in that role can uniquely really stem the tide across so many fronts. And he's got to be strategic with how he goes about it. And again, it's not about one thing. There's a lot of stressors. There's a lot of things that I mentioned, and I know he is aware enough about all these issues that to get things shifting in the right direction. So I'm just very hopeful that we're getting to a place where we are addressing a lot of these root causes in a systemic way, and the explosion of these neurological conditions and these diagnoses, we start to turn the tide. And going back to EMF, we can do all that, But if kids are constantly on their screens and on their phones, and the dysregulation that happens just from our addiction to screen time, social media, and all that, that's another important piece of the puzzle. So again, we're moving in so exponentially in so many different areas, AI and the impact of that. But for these known stressors that are out there, to be able to start having policy and science that helps us to make better decisions as a society, I couldn't be more hopeful now that he's in place and he's assembled the right team. And again, fingers crossed. But I've been hoping and praying that he would get that role for a long, long time. So to see it actually happening is it gives me a reason for informed optimism.
Yeah, you mentioned the word informed a couple of times, and that's something that's missing. It's missing in medicine and a lot of different things, really.
And I say that not arrogantly, because I was very uninformed. So all the ways that I mentioned about parents, and I wasn't a lowly person. I showed up even more naively confident that I could, uninformed confidence almost. But yeah, I think just taking the time, it's inconvenient to get more information. What's going on with your child? What's going on? What are these stressors? The idea of not wanting to know because then you'll have to take some action. Yeah, that's just not a great strategy.
Yeah, informed. People aren't. We don't get informed consent over like medications and things. Like we get like small cliff notes of it. But a couple more questions, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead.
What is one thing you wish everyone knew about autism?
I guess my answer, you won't like it, but I would say it's that label is irrelevant. I would say that term autism, it just really is practically meaningless, because it's autism spectrum, whether it's high functioning or profound autism, huge differences. And that's where, even with my son, I've said this on a few episodes. I mean, I forget the age where he even heard the term from me, because I never used the label with him. So I think he was around 15. He's 18 now, before he had any sense that he, quote unquote, had or has autism. I mean, right now he is profoundly different than where he was, but he's still a quirky kid. And some people would probably see him and be like, oh, yeah, he's somewhere on the spectrum. But he's never identified with that. And that's where, I guess, what I wish people would learn is that just take the diagnosis, take whatever label that you have. Hey, that is information you can use. And it's not about denying reality, but forget about treating autism, addressing autism. It's all like, what's going on with your child? What are the behaviors, or what's the physical issues they have? And again, I think what I'd like people to catch is, it's not about treating autism. It's about you figuring out what are the unique root causes behind whatever's happening, and focus there. So I would say drop the label. And I guess the way I look at it is, if this is a game, and I think it is, about having really good educated guesses on the 2 or 3 root causes to focus on for your child right now, I think it's like pin the tail on the donkey, where you have this huge list of possible root causes, and the key is, putting that thumbtack on the ones to focus on now. And that's why I created actually a master database of root causes and secondary root causes. Like, it's pretty complex, all the possible root causes that are out there. But a parent on their own is just kind of guessing. And so the key is, get a good advisory team to help you make better educated guesses. And what I do now for a living is to help parents really have more precision with where to stick that thumbtack on a few key root causes to address now. And so it's the difference between playing pin the tail on a donkey blindfolded versus doing it with eyes wide open and in a much more aware and an informed way.
That label you mentioned earlier in the episode about our beliefs, that label can really hamper our beliefs. And you don't allow it to do that.
You're 100% right. That belief that it's about autism really can steer you in the wrong direction. And so again, you can with lightness take that information, and it's data, it's someone's opinion, it's comparing your child to some benchmark. Okay, great, you take that in, but again, I just thought there was no upside with me defining my child with that diagnosis, and I definitely didn't think it would benefit him to walk around and feel, oh yeah, I have autism. And again, it's not about denying, and it's not about lack of respect for a neurodivergent person, not at all. I just didn't think that label, really served any purpose. So that's where, in answer to your question, yeah, I would say parents just rethink what that label means to you, take it more lightly as information, but focus much more on where is your child is. And the big question for you to ask yourself is not how can I treat or address autism? It's, how can I, in a much more powerful way, meet my child where they are and to make useful decisions that help unlock their capacity. And if you're looking at it from that perspective and dropping that label, I think you remove a lot of friction off the bat.
Yeah, friction. I like your use of friction today. It's something that's concerning to me is uh, one thing that I hope is done soon is taking back the definition of autism, though, not to kind of cancel out what we just talked about, but the definition of autism is wide open now, and it's nothing but confusion. And I don't necessarily think that I'm a fan of that, but it's like just throwing everything into like this autism spectrum thing, and just because of there's a little bit of delta and shifts from the social norms that some people, I'll take odd or quirky, eccentric type of things. That's great. I don't mind that at all. But it's like there's just, the definitions have changed over the last maybe 15 years or so, 20 years, kind of post hoc of the lax schedule and things. But
Yeah,
I hope that,
I was just say it just gets so confusing, right? With the labels, and that's where again it's just drop it and just focus on what's going on with my child, and just that label, especially as they continue to make changes, it just may not be very useful. And again, it doesn't define anything. And the way I describe it is that right now, at least, autism is a label that's given if you exhibit a certain number of symptoms, if you check enough boxes, and that is all purely for the purpose to get this formal diagnosis that ultimately enables you to get services that actually then address those symptoms, right? So the whole thing is a hamster wheel about symptoms, and there's nothing about the root cause. You go talk to a behavioral therapist about root cause, they may look at you like you're crazy. Like, what do you mean root cause, right? So that's where the system that exists now is all symptom driven in terms of diagnosis, and then what you do with that diagnosis. So my suggestion is, again, step off of that and just have more of a root cause approach with lightness, with pure acceptance of your child as they are now, label or no label. That acceptance is key because we're all so unique. And that's why forcing any kind of label on it isn't usually helpful. But the full acceptance of your child as they are now, can you endeavor to really address the root causes as opposed to just focusing on the symptoms? It doesn't mean you can't do things on the symptoms, but that if that's where all your energy is going, everyone will stay stuck.
yeah, that's not a good outcome either. Have we not, or is there anything else that we haven't covered? I have one last question. But if there's anything that we haven't covered or you want to share, feel free to do so. And definitely tell us about how to contact you for that one-on-one coaching and direct
Yeah.
us to your website.
Well,
Before,
I'll do that quick, and then you end it with your final question. But yeah, it's easy. People can go to elevatehowyounavigate.com. That talks about this coaching program. It starts with people clicking. They can book time on my calendar, a few questions, and again, it's super easy. And if this is a fit, we're off to the races. And if it's not, that call itself will be useful for you because sometimes parents just need some space to see things more clearly. So I'd encourage anyone, go there. The podcast, obviously, Autism Parenting Secrets, and you go to autismparenting-secrets.com. That's the main website, but elevatehowyounavigate.com is where to go for this very unique way of, as a parent, being supported in a real-time way, unlike anything that anybody else can provide. So again, I've been focused on this particular problem. I don't think anyone else does anything close to what I do. And again, what I do, it's not about me. It's about the parent, again, moving into a position where they're running on all cylinders quickly.
Yeah. And just from my experience too, the listener can maybe sign up for the email subscription, because you send out very useful and updated emails. So it's very
Yep,
fortunate.
absolutely. You can do that. And again, the emails are mainly about each week's episode. And again, I'd encourage any of your listeners, listen to the podcast. It's meant to be a good use of your time, a big ROI in terms of the time invested and the information, and just overall the what you can take away is tangible. And again, any feedback, I always appreciate feedback on who parents would like as guests or what topics to cover. So people can definitely do that. You can always reach out to me at len@allinparent.com. And again, I welcome any feedback.
Fantastic. So the last question I had is that I don't want to sound arrogant or anything, but so with 2026 coming up, I just want to ask, because I've been asking people, how will you serve humanity in 2026?
Well, I think it'll be doubling down on what I mentioned with respect to 2026 is the year of parents becoming equipped and empowered to make great decisions. And through the podcast, through the coaching, I just want to, even in a more powerful way, help more and more parents see that they can make this leap, that they can step into this much stronger version of themselves. And ultimately, I think 2026, the way I would describe it, is the year of avoiding unnecessary suffering, because this journey can feel really hard and in so many ways. And I say this with honor and respect. I know the real challenges parents are facing. And again, the key is you becoming the best decision maker you can. And you can't do that if you're in your own way, if you're making things harder. And again, for you to take control over what you can change, which is yourself, why not make that power move as quickly as you can? So I would say, 2026 for a parent, avoid the unnecessary suffering, bring your best self forward. It's not selfish to prioritize your own self-care and your own ability to make great decisions. It's actually the greatest gift you can make. And I think with everything going on in Washington and within this country, I think parents are going to be in an even better position to make really good informed choices about what's right for their child. And the outcome, yes, perhaps less people being diagnosed, but the real big outcome is just greater love and connection within these family units, because the autism diagnosis can wreak so much havoc in so many ways. And that, more than anything, is what I'd love for my efforts to contribute towards.
There's no better way to end. So excellent job, Len. I just admire your passion.
Well, thank you, Ryan. I admire yours, and I'm looking forward to having you on my podcast very soon.
Oh, sounds good. All right. Take care.
Thank you.